ever wondered about Aristotle's four clauses or about Plato's ladder of love? On today's episode of Evergreen Spotlight, I sit down with Dr. Frank Scalambrino of the Philosophemes podcast to get to know how he answers these questions. Come along with me through this journey of philosophy on this episode of Evergreen Spotlight. Welcome to Evergreen Spotlight, Dr. Frank Scalambrino. We are so happy to have you join us.
Thank you so much, Julie. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with you.
What exactly motivated you to pull the trigger and go ahead and create Philosophemes?
In terms of a precise answer to that question, I'm not sure that I could say exactly what it was. I always wanted to learn more in regard to graphic design. And so as I started to sort of dabble in graphic design, I started to think, hey, maybe I could make some videos. Maybe I could make a podcast. I read an article. I'm thinking of Mark and Wes over at Close Reads, the Close Reads Philosophy podcast. And I read an article by them in which they said that a podcast reaches more people than a professor can reach with a university course. And I agree with that. I think that's really something important to keep in mind. And, I was thinking of Tanner over at the Practical Stoicism podcast. And, what an excellent work ethic he has. I think at this period of time, I think he's putting out 3 podcasts a week. That's a lot of work. And so anyway, I want to say, I find both of those podcasts to be impressive. And I think that my motivations are in harmony with the things that I find them talking about and being motivated by as well.
The whole point of Evergreen Spotlight is really just to get more information about our hosts. And so how did you enter this world of philosophy and psychology? What is it about those subjects that you love?
I appreciate that question. I have a very long answer to this question, but the short answer is I feel like this is a calling for me, sincerely. So I sometimes think that there are other paths that could or should be explored, but this is truly a calling for me. I can't stop doing it. So.
Well, just so you know, we want that long answer, so it's okay. Like we have, this is our show, so we can make it as long or as short. So thank you. And really, what is a philosopheme? Please tell us. But I tried asking Alexa and it didn't work.
Sure. Yeah. There is an answer on Google. There's a few answers on Google, but basically the German romantic philosopher F.W.J. Schelling, he coined the term. He made it up in reference to some of the ancient sayings. So I think it's Philosophemes podcast number 2. Maybe it's number 3, where the topic is what is a philosopheme. And so I kind of go through the whole spiel explaining what a philosopheme is. But basically, if you have some sort of excerpt from philosophy, a quote is the easiest way to think of it, and you really love it, Schelling would refer to that as a philosopheme. So I just sort of picked up that term from him.
And what are some of your favorite themes of philosophy?
That's a great question. So I think my favorite philosophemes are all of the existential ideas that help us understand life as joyful despite suffering.
Ooh, I like that. That felt good. And you've taught several classes. In your bio, you have over 100 different courses that you've taught. You're also an author, writing over 10 books. And I'm wondering, has there been a particularly rewarding aspect of your career?
I would say that, and I think that this is the answer that any teacher would give, any professor would give, but I think my favorite aspect of all of this has been mentoring others. My dad was a coach, and I feel like in some ways I tried very hard to not end up being a coach. And it turns out that I think I love coaching. So, so I'd say the mentoring aspect. Yeah.
Yeah. And is there a common, encouragement that you give to your mentees? Like, is there something that you really love to refer back to, or an overall idea that really helps the people that you work with?
I would say that meeting the person where they are, but again, this consistent existentialist theme of trying to find the best relation to your obstacles, trying to find the best relation to the difficulties that you encounter on your path.
That kind of reminds me of a thought of, like, if someone's in a well, you're not just like screaming down at them. It's better to climb down into the well and help them out. So is it kind of like that, like meeting people where they are?
I would say yes, in a way. I don't mean to imply that the people that I encounter are stuck, or that they're sort of lost or anything like that. Just rather this idea of helping a person recontextualize, or so I hate to admit this these days. The older I get, the less and less I'm willing to admit it. But I started off as a Freudian. I started off in psychology, and of course, I just thought Sigmund Freud was great a very long time ago. And so, one of the things I would still say is that many people have a worldview that is, that it comes out of their developmental experience, right? Their experience with their parents and the kind of context they grew up in. And so it's very difficult, I think, when we are still sort of learning who we are in the world, to be able to recontextualize your situation. And I actually think that, the internet makes it, and social media makes it more difficult, not less difficult, right? So that's kind of what I was trying to get at when I was saying, what I find is that there are many people who they so wholeheartedly believe the internet and so wholeheartedly believe social media that they just sort of accept that they must be whoever it is that the internet is telling them that they should be. And, one of the things that I was trying to suggest by meeting them where they are is sort of trying to figure out, is there a way to recontextualize that?
Is the internet a specific place that you turn to for your research, or do you go back really to publications and books?
I always go back to publications and books. So this is maybe a strange angle to approach this question from, but there was a period of time, I would say, probably around 2011. And, that window of time is maybe 4 or 5 years or so. And you can hear some people actually talk about this on the internet, but there was a period of time when the internet was sort of the golden age of the internet. This was right before people figured out how to turn Google Books into, the public domain Google Books into something that they could sell, and things like that. And so basically, Google Books, you could go and read pretty much anything you wanted that was in the public domain and on Google Books. And one of the lovely things also is that you could search the Google Books, which is, of course, not something that you can do with a physical book. So that was wonderful. But once people started figuring out how to turn a profit from this, and not in very sophisticated ways, in my opinion, but once they figured out how to turn a profit from this, basically all these things started, these constraints started to appear in regard to the internet. And I think that that's where we're at now. So, the Internet Archive, this sort of mass global public library, is constantly, being shut down or constantly being squeezed and constrained. And so I guess the short answer to your question is that no, I'm still dealing with physical books. I sometimes I think I'd rather not, but yeah. In fact, I'm always losing my books. I can't find, as it stands right now, I'm still looking for 2 books that I know I didn't get rid of, but I just can't find them anywhere. So
Good. I don't feel as bad than misplacing the books that I have as well. Is there a common misconception philosophically that people often believe?
There is. And so the background to my answer is that there's a very wide generalization that is made in regard to philosophy nowadays, and that's this distinction between what's called analytic philosophy and continental philosophy. And there are, pretty much everyone recognizes that this is not a good distinction, but it is the distinction that we're working with these days. And analytic philosophy still by far dominates university philosophy. And analytic philosophy, the analytic philosophers will tell you this if you ask them. Analytic philosophy is primarily philosophy of language. So when they're trying to answer a question, what they're really doing is investigating and examining language. I'm not an analytic philosopher. I do have training in analytic philosophy, but I'm a continental philosopher. And continental philosophy is essentially the philosophy of the continent, or philosophy of Europe. So I'm looking at the Greeks and the Italians and the French and the Germans, for example. And so the common misconception then becomes, and I blame, people like Sapolsky and Sam Harris and those kinds of individuals out there for perpetuating this prejudice. But the common misconception is then that philosophy is really just about language. And that's how we ended up with, these silly things like the trolley problem. And, you got Sam Harris saying things like, and Sapolsky saying things like, there's no such thing as free will. These are just silly conclusions to be drawing, in my opinion, but this is how we got here. So, yeah.
I have so much more learning to do and research. I got to find my books for sure.
You're in luck. You can check out my podcast. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And you also are a writer of 10 different books. Do you have a special one that maybe you would suggest to us to start off with?
It's so funny. I feel as though,
which child is your favorite, basically?
Yeah, right. Yeah. My books are difficult to read. That's probably true. I get that feedback often. I spent so much time in the libraries that at some point I think you just start having a conversation with library books, and then other human beings come and listen in on that conversation, and they're like, "What are you talking about?" I really like my Nietzsche book. I feel like my Nietzsche book did sort of make an impact. I think some people are trying to reverse that impact, but I like the Nietzsche book. So it's called Full Throttle Heart, The Rapture and Ecstasy of Nietzsche's Dionysian Worldview. I really like that one. The existentialism books. I think that the existentialism books are very helpful for sorting out people's ideas about existentialism. So those are the books I think that really are in the foreground for me. Yeah.
Thank you. And I love libraries as well. So thank you for that. Okay, let's get into our rapid fire questions. So basically, it's just a few rapid fire questions. Dr. Scalambrino, are you up for it?
Yes, I'm up for
it. Get your clicker ready. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, who is your favorite philosopher?
Oh, I knew it. This is an extremely difficult question. I'm so sorry. As far as rapid fire goes, it's almost impossible to answer this question. So I can give you a quick handful. Plato, Aristotle, Kant. I like Ficino. I like Heidegger. I like Deleuze. Sorry. Yeah. I probably, so somebody asked me the other day, they said, if you could go back and meet any historical figure, who would you like to go back and meet? And I said, Kant. Yeah. I said Kant. I said Immanuel Kant. And they were shocked. They said, we can't believe you didn't say Plato. And I thought, well, if you'd asked me later in the day, I might have said Plato. So, it's really difficult to say.
So is that the historical figure that you would have dinner with, or does that change based off of what you're doing, like to actually spend time with them?
That's funny. Yeah, a lot of these guys probably weren't much fun to be around. My understanding is Immanuel Kant refused to talk about philosophy over dinner. He would only talk about business and current events at dinners. Right. Yeah. So I guess if we're talking about dinner, it'd be fun to sit down with Plato, I think, for dinner. Yeah.
Yes, amazing. Thank you. And what is a good book that you would recommend to someone new to philosophy or wanting to learn more?
I really like the Platonic dialogues. I think that reading Plato's dialogues is a fun and good place to start, uh, especially because it's possible to engage them on so many levels. So, you can engage them at a very introductory level if you'd like, and then, the mystery of what else Plato was up to starts to draw you in. So I would recommend the Platonic dialogues.
And your favorite place to write?
Oh my. Wow. I think you stumped me with that one, Julie. my favorite place to write.
I love that I'm stumping you.
That's true. Yes,
stumping you is
I cannot answer that question. No, so my writing process. Someone had asked me about this the other day. My writing process is, forgive me. I'm not. I guess just to state it, is that my writing process is kind of extreme. There's really, if it wasn't so extreme, there's no way that I would have been able to write so many books so fast. So I think that sometimes, I can't even, I don't even know where I am when I'm writing these books. So, it's such an intense process. Yeah.
I think that's a great insight. I like that. If you had to describe your podcast style in 1 to 3 words, what would it be?
Excessively succinct. Does that?
Well, could you break that down just a little bit, and you can give me more words? I can give you more than 3.
So someone just contacted me the other day, and they said, "What's your podcast personality?" And they said, "Take this quiz," right? So I was afraid to click the link, but maybe I'll give it a try now. What I'm striving for. So forgive me if I could kind of just take one step back. But basically, when I'm writing books, I'm trying to make a contribution to the literature, really, right? So I'm trying to fill a gap in the literature, and so. But what I find is that a lot of people, it's just not their cup of tea to just live in a library, right? Which I felt like for many, many years, I was just living in libraries. And so when it comes to the podcast, I'm really trying to produce something that is accessible and yet at the same time succinct, right? So I'm trying to deliver something that I hope gives access to higher level ideas, but at the same time, doesn't sort of get bogged down in unnecessary detail. I know that's difficult to say about philosophy, but really that's kind of where my mind's at the time.
Frank, what are your future plans for Philosophemes?
So, in the very near future, we have some really fun episodes coming up. In my opinion, I'm looking at some ideas in existentialism and some ideas in Immanuel Kant's philosophy that I think, it's extremely difficult to find people talking about these topics. And so I'm excited for them. And I hope it's the case that I've been able to present them in, a way that's accessible and succinct. So that's the short version. I'm hoping, I'm so busy. I'm so busy that it, I forget some of the things that I'm working on because I'm working on so many things. And I realize that that's not necessarily the best relation. Both Lao Tzu and Kierkegaard will tell you that if you chase more than one rabbit at a time, you're not going to catch any rabbits. But I'm hoping that I'm streamlining the workflow, and I'm hoping that we've got some translations on the horizon here. We've got one of them. It's pretty much in the finalizing phase here, and just trying to decide whether we're going to try to release these things all at once or if we're going to release them out slowly. Also, I would like to. I've got lots of outlines and things of that nature in terms of books and research stacks and such. So there's at least three more books. I hope if I'm around long enough, there's at least three more books that I would like to write. But other than that, I'm really enjoying making podcasts. I've been getting some encouraging feedback, and that makes me very happy. And so I hope it's the case that I can, just continue to make some podcasts. I am spanning a lot of, at this point still, I'm sort of shotgunning topics, right? Because I'm kind of like, well, this would be good to share with people. This would be good to share with people, right? But I think at some point here, I'll become a little bit more focused on like a specific philosopher or a specific book and podcast about that for a little while, and then just kind of go that direction with it. So that's kind of where I'm at with everything presently.
Dr. Scalambrino, thank you so much for joining us today. It's so great to get to know you and what really motivates you and your inspiration behind your podcast.
Thank you so much, Julie. It's been a real pleasure to be here with you.
And to our listeners, don't forget you can check out Philosophemes on the Evergreen Network. You can also search any of your podcast platforms and find out all things psychology and philosophy. Check out Philosophemes. I'm Julie Holliday.